Hello viewers, welcome back to UnboundVerse. Thanks for joining this video today. This topic I'm about to share today, it's not particular towards anybody. In the essence of it, it's for anybody, any group, any community out there that's having a rethink about their community, their society, how to make it better, how to get themselves to the level where they want to see themselves operate. Okay, and that's gonna lead me to discuss this topic today. Okay, and the topic is titled in two forms. It's gonna lead us to talking about what critical thinking is, but the main title is The Day Our Minds Broke Free. The day our minds broke free. Now, I'm going to start with critical thinking part of it. Okay, so you know how we do it on UnboundVerse. Let's get into it. What is critical thinking about? Critical thinking is the ability to analyze, evaluate, and interpret information objectively to make reasoned judgment. It involves questioning assumptions, recognizing biases, considering multiple perspectives, and using logic to solve problems or reach conclusions. Critical thinkers don't just accept information at face value. They explore underlying evidence, reasoning, and implications to make informed decisions. It's essential for problem solving, it's essential for decision making, and it's essential for independent thoughts across many fields and everyday life. Now, what is the age limit for critical thinking ability? You're surprised too, right? There is no specific age limit for critical thinking ability. People can develop and improve critical thinking skills throughout their lives. While young children might not have fully developed critical thinking skills, they can still learn basic forms of reasoning. This ability typically begins to sharpen during adolescence and continue to grow as individuals gain more experience, more education, more exposure to different ideas. What about the older adults? The older adults can maintain or even improve their critical thinking abilities with mental exercises, continued learning, and active engagement in intellectual activities. However, cognitive changes in aging, such as declines in memory or processing speed, might affect the speed at which critical thinking occurs, but not necessarily the ability itself. Now, if majority of a country or a community lack critical thinking, what would the country be like? What would the community be like? If the majority of a country's population lacks critical thinking skills, the country may face several significant challenges. a lot of significant challenges. We're going to dive into these challenges. One is going to be a weak governance and corruption. People may be more easily manipulated by misinformation, leading to poor political decisions and allowing corruption and corrupt leaders to rise and stay in power. Poor economic development is another thing that will be as a result of non-critical thinkers in a community. Without critical thinking, innovation and problem solving will be stifled, making it harder for businesses and industries to adapt and thrive in a competitive global market. Another challenge of lack of critical thinking is going to be social instability and misinformation. So, misinformation, propaganda, and rumors may spread easily, leading to division, unrest, and conflict within the society, as people may be less able to critically evaluate these sources and their impact. Educational decline is going to be a big one for a society that lacks critical thinkers. The education system would likely suffer, as students and even teachers may not question information or develop strong analytical skills. This can perpetuate a cycle of ignorance. Inability to address complex issues is another challenge of lack of critical thinkers. A country lacking a critical thinkers might struggle with addressing complex global and national issues like climate change, healthcare, or technological advancement, since such problems require deep analysis and creative solutions. Reduced civic engagement is another challenge of lack of critical thinkers in a country or in a community. Citizens may be less likely to engage in meaningful public discourses. They will be less interested in participating in democratic processes or hold their leaders accountable, and this will lead to less effective governance and slower societal progress. The society will progress very, very, very slowly. In general, such a country or a community would likely be less competitive on the global stage, more prone to authoritarianism, and they will face slower or unstable progress. Now, how could the majority in this kind of country be enlightened about critical thinking? How can you open their eyes to see that? How can you help them to begin to think critically? Enlightening the majority in a country that lacks critical thinking requires a multifaceted approach. There's no one approach to this. These approaches were aimed at transformation, education, media governance, and societal norms. Here are some key strategies that could be implemented. Educational reform is the first one. Promote critical thinking in schools. There's nothing wrong with that. Introduce and emphasize critical thinking skills from an early age. Encourage students to question assumptions. Encourage them to analyze problems from multiple angles. Encourage them to engage in debates and discussions. Teacher training comes to mind. Train educators to foster critical thinking through inquiry-based learning, through problem-solving exercises, and through open-ended questions rather than rote memorization. Integrate real-world problems. Include discussions on real-world issues to develop students' abilities to think critically about societal changes. Because without real-world discussions, nobody is going to be aware of what's going on in their surrounding. Number 2 is the media literacy campaign. You need to combat misinformation. Launch public awareness campaigns about the importance of discerning credible information from fake news or biased sources. Teach media literacy. Teach media literacy. Encourage people to critically evaluate the media they consume by checking the sources, understanding biases, and analyzing content. Don't just take it. Okay? Community programs. Hold workshops in communities that teach individuals how to question information, how to spot logical fallacies, and engage in critical discussions. Okay? Civic engagement and participation. Civic engagement and participation is another way. Okay? Encourage public debates and forums. Encourage civic engagement through town hall meetings, through debates and discussions where diverse opinions are heard and reasoning is valued. Reasoning is valued. Critical thinking in policy discussions. Okay, apply critical thinking in policy discussions. Create platforms where people can contribute to policy discussions, ensuring the public engages with data-driven arguments and thoughtful reasoning. Data-driven arguments and thoughtful reasoning. Encourage accountability. Foster a culture of accountability where public officials and leaders are questioned and held to high standards of logic and transparency. Okay? They are questionable. Cultural shifts is another solution. Encourage questioning and curiosity. Cultivate a culture that values curiosity. Don't shut down people that are asking questions. Create time to answer their questions. Open-mindedness and the ability to question norms, tradition, and authority in a respectful manner. Encourage those things. Art and literatures. Promote critical thinking through cultural means such as literature, theater, films, and other arts that challenge societal views and encourage deeper reflection. Public figures and influencers. You guys have a job to do in this. Encourage influential personalities to advocate for critical thinking and emphasize its importance in media, entertainment, and public life. Strengthen democratic processes. Encourage democratic dialogue by ensuring that citizens are exposed to healthy democratic discourse where different viewpoints are discussed based on evidence, logic, and sound argumentation. There's no reason to fight. There's no reason to hit each other. Okay? Transparency and access to information comes to play here. Ensure that the government promotes transparency and makes information readily available, allowing citizens to analyze policies and decisions critically. Because if the citizens don't know the policies in the country, What are they going to critically think about? Access to diverse sources of information should be made available. Promote independent media, independent of, support and develop independent media outlets that provide fact-based reporting and promote critical analysis of current events. Don't lie. Encourage reading and lifelong learning. Foster a culture of reading and continuous learning to help individuals become more informed and capable of thinking critically about the world around them. Focus on youth and future generations. Youth empowerment programs. Create programs aimed at empowering youth to think critically, develop leadership skills, and become change makers in their communities. Leverage the technology. Leverage the use of technology. Use digital platforms. Use apps and online courses to teach a wide audience, particularly the younger generation, with lessons on critical thinking, like I'm doing right now. Any young persons watching this video will begin to reminiscence over critical thinking. By focusing on these strategies, a country can gradually build a more enlightened, critically thinking population capable of solving complex problems and contributing to the nation's progress. You see how a nation progresses now? Now, how long will it take majority to begin applying critical thinking? How long? The time it takes for the majority of a population to begin applying critical thinking depends on several factors, including the extent of existing gaps in education, the effectiveness of the reforms implemented, and the cultural or societal context. However, based on similar large-scale social changes, it could take decades for critical thinking to become widespread, because it's going to be fought against, it's going to be pushed back, it's going to be seen as new things. So it's going to take decades. Now, here's a breakdown of the timeline factors that will not let the critical thinking awareness spread quickly. Educational reforms, 10 to 20 years. Short-term impact, 5 to 10 years. After introducing critical thinking curricula, younger generations in school may start demonstrating improved critical thinking within a decade. However, the full impact of these reforms will take time, as they need to be integrated into all levels of education. Long-term impact, 10 to 20 years. It could take 10 to 20 years before the first generation fully educated under such a system enters the workforce and become the majority in society. These individuals will then influence broader culture and professional practices. You've had this group, they are now critical thinkers. Wherever they influences people, wherever they work, the critical thinking ability will spread and multiply. Cultural and societal change, 10 to 30 years. And this is why gradual shift cultural shifts are slow and require continuous effort from various institutions like media, the arts, the public discourse, It may take 10 to 30 years before critical thinking becomes a societal norm. Public discourse and media. Increased media literacy and access to diverse information can begin changing public attitudes and practices within 5 to 10 years, but achieving majority engagement can take much longer, as this involves changing entrenched habits and perspectives. Entrenched habits and perspective could be hard to change. Institutional support, 5 to 15 years. Government and civic engagement. If governments actively promote transparency, accountability, and democratic participation, people may start adopting critical thinking in civic life within 5 to 15 years. However, political resistance or corruption can significantly delay this progress. We are going to go into the dream and try to do some interpretation today. All right, how to do it. Let's get into it. So, okay. Access to resources and information. Access to resources and information, 5 to 20 years. Technology and independent media. Digital platforms and independent media can accelerate access to critical thinking skills, potentially shortening the timeline to 5 to 10 years for segments of the population to start participating these skills. However, widespread impact will depend on infrastructure and access to information. Challenges to change. Resistance from traditional system is gonna come to play here. Some people don't like to change. Some people don't like change. If there is resistance from established institutions, authoritarian governance, or deeply ingrained cultural practices that discourage questioning or critical thinking, this process could take even longer. Unequal development will then begin to come in. Some regions or sectors of society may adopt critical thinking faster than the others, creating disparities in how quickly the majority embraces these skills. Okay. Potential timeline for majority application of critical thinking. Potential timeline for majority application of critical thinking. Early signs of change, 5 to 10 years, especially among younger generations and educated groups. Broader society adoption, 20 to 30 years. As educational reforms, media literacy, and cultural shifts take root, those things takes time to get to the root. Ultimately, the timeline will depend on the scale and consistency of efforts made across education, governance, media, and cultural spheres. If the country turned deaf ears to learning critical thinking, what will become of their lives. If a country collectively, which that would be absurd, that would be weird, if a country collectively turns a deaf ear to learning and applying critical thinking, the long-term consequences could be severe, impacting nearly every aspect of life. Here's what could happen. Stunted economic growth. Lack of innovation is going to set in here. Without critical thinking, creativity and innovation will be stifled. Businesses and industries may struggle to compete globally, as problem solving and adaptability are crucial in an evolving economy. Inefficient workforce. A workforce that lacks critical thinking would have difficulty in handling complex tasks, making decisions, and solving problems effectively. This could lead to lower productivity and inefficiency across sectors. That's a bigger problem. Political instability and corruption. That's gonna be king. Manipulations by leaders everywhere. Without the ability to question authority or critically evaluate information, the population becomes vulnerable to manipulation by corrupt or authoritarian leaders. Propaganda and misinformation can easily sway public opinions, enabling oppressive regimes. Weak accountability. Nothing will ever be accounted for in such country. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Citizens may not hold their leaders accountable, allowing corruption and abuse of power to flourish unchecked because they don't have critical thinking to do the holding of accountable. They can't do it. They don't know how to do it. They don't know what to do. They don't think they should do it. Poor decision making in daily life will be a bigger problem too. Vulnerability to scams and misinformation will flourish. People will be more susceptible to falling for scams, fake news, or bad advice because they lack the ability to assess the validity of information they are receiving. Harmful lifestyle choices. Critical thinking is essential for making informed decisions about health, about finances, and personal well-being. Without critical thinking, individuals might make poor choices that lead to negative consequences, such as poor health, debt, or exploitation. Social division and conflict is going to be rampant in a country where there is lack of critical thinking ability. Spread of rumors and misinformation is going to, encourage it. In the absence of critical thinking, rumors, conspiracy theories, and misinformation can spread easily, leading to social unrest and division. People may act on false beliefs, fueling tensions and conflict within communities. Lack of problem solving is another one. Social and communal issues such as poverty, inequality, or crime could go unaddressed because the population might lack the ability to engage in meaningful evidence-based discussions and solutions. Cultural and intellectual stagnation. The culture will be stagnant intellectual will be stagnant. There will be a decline in intellectual and artistic life. The absence of critical thought can lead to a decline in intellectual curiosity, intellectual art, and intellectual cultural development. Societies that fail to encourage critical thinking often struggle to advance in literature, science, philosophy, and the arts. Resistance to new ideas will also be a problem. Societies may become resistant to new ideas or technological advancements, preferring to maintain the status quo rather than questioning or exploring the new possibilities. Deteriorating education system. Rote learning education may focus primarily on memorization rather than understanding, analysis, or application. This is why you can see some people will be able to recite the periodic table from top to bottom, but they don't understand nothing. This can lead to a population that is knowledgeable but lacks the ability to apply that knowledge in meaningful or creative ways. This is very big. Low quality education. An uncritical populace may tolerate a declining education system, further perpetuating the cycle of ignorance and lack of critical engagement. Okay, somebody might know the periodic table from top to bottom, but they don't understand anything about how to put it into application. Global marginalization will set in. There will be a reduced global competitiveness in such country. A country that does not embrace critical thinking will struggle to compete on the global stage. There's no doubt about that. This can lead to economic isolation, diminished influence in international affairs, and dependency on more developed nations. That's where you will see them. They will go and be borrowing money. They will go and be seeking for help and advice instead of them to critically think. Falling behind in the technology and science will be a problem too. Technological advancement and scientific innovation rely on critical thinking and inquiry. Without this, the country may fall behind in critical fields like healthcare, technology, and environmental management. You will never see all these things come to light in those kind of country where critical thinking is zero or is lacking. Increased poverty and inequality. You will see a widening inequality among the people of that country. The absence of critical thinking could allow the rich and powerful to maintain their status while the rest of the population remains disadvantaged. Poor decision making and lack of opportunity for advancement can lead to increased poverty and social inequality. This is where you will see one beautiful mansion here, and then surrounding it, you're going to see a tattered looking, rickety, almost about to fall out house. Economic dependency will be a thing in that country. A country without a critical thinking populace may become overly reliant on external aid or foreign intervention as it fails to develop sustainable economic practices internally because they lack critical thinking. They will be depending on foreign countries for aid, for things they can do. Environmental degradation is another thing. Inability to address environmental issues will set in because they lack critical thinking. Complex environmental challenges such as climate change or pollution require innovative solutions based on critical analysis. Without the ability to critically assess these issues, the country may fail to implement effective policies, leading to long-term environmental damages. That's where you see there's no drainage system, it's flooding everywhere, damaging properties. Excuse me. Erosion of democratic values. Weak civil society will be a common thing in a country that lacks critical thinking. A lack of critical thinking undermines democratic values such as free speech, debate, and participation in governance. Citizens may become passive, disengaged, or easily swayed by populists or populist rhetoric, weakening democratic institutions. Authoritarianism will become a big thing in such country. Without the ability to question authority or think independently, authoritarianism may rise and personal freedoms could erode. That's how you see somebody will be godfather for so many years. Democracy requires an informed and critically thinking populace to thrive. Democracy requires a reformed and critically thinking country or people to thrive. Okay? It does. In essence, if a country turns away from critical thinking, it risks descending into a cycle of poverty, instability, ignorance, and authoritarianism. The quality of life for most people in such a country would likely suffer, and the nation could become increasingly marginalized in a rapidly evolving world. Now, the question is, what if the country or the people listened and start thinking critically? If they start thinking critically, they accept the idea, well, this is what's going to happen. So if they start, thinking critically, if a country begins to embrace and apply critical thinking, the positive outcomes could be transformative across multiple areas of life. Here's what could happen. It's going to be majorly the opposite of all those bad stuff that I mentioned ahead. So we're going to start with economic growth and innovation. There will be an increased productivity. Critical thinking fosters creativity and problem-solving skills, leading to greater productivity in the workforce. People will find more efficient ways to work. They will find more efficient ways to solve problems. They will find more efficient ways to innovate. Entrepreneurship and innovation will be common. A culture of critical thinking encourages entrepreneurship and the development of new ideas, development of technologies, new technology, development of new businesses. This can boost the economy and create new job opportunities. What about global competitiveness? With a critical thinking population, the country would become more competitive in the global stage, attracting foreign investment and potentially leading in key industries. Look at it now. Some countries of this world are sought after. People want stuff that are produced from their country. It's because their people have critically thinking. Improved governance and accountability will come to play. Informed electorates will be a thing. Citizens who think critically are less likely to be swayed by populism or misinformation. They will make more informed voting decisions, demanding accountability and transparency from their leaders. There will be a reduction in corruption, huge reduction in corruption. Critical thinking fosters skepticism and the questioning of authority. A population that holds its leaders accountable is less likely to tolerate corruption, and will push for stronger institutions that promote good governance. Effective policy making will be smiling all over the country. Public participation in the policy making process would improve, because now you have critical thinkers that are willing to participate in policy making processes. As people would engage in meaningful debates, they will analyze policies critically, and they will support evidence-based solutions. They will provide evidence-based solutions. Better education system. Oh, that would be the sweetest. Shift to critical pedagogy will be a thing. Look it up. Pedagogy is a word. Education system would evolve to emphasize critical thinking, inquiry, and solving problems. Students will not just memorize facts, but they will learn how to analyze these facts, how to question, and how to apply this knowledge. Okay, global educational standards. By fostering a culture of critical thinking, the country could improve its global ranking in education and produce highly skilled graduates ready to compete in a knowledge-driven economy. A social harmony and cooperation will thrive. It will be successful. Reduced misinformation and division will be something that will be seen in a population that has critical thinking. A population that applies critical thinking is less likely to fall for misinformation, less likely to fall for conspiracy theories or divisive rhetoric. This can lead to a more informed and harmonious society. Collaborative problem solving will be present. People will be better equipped to tackle social challenges like inequality, poverty, or healthcare through collaborative, data-driven solution. Societal cohesion would improve as individuals work together to address common problems, because they are all critical thinkers. Cultural and intellectual flourishing will happen. There will be a revival of arts and the sciences. So critical thinking fuels creativity and inquiry, which can lead to a flourishing of the arts, the flourishing of science, the flourishing of philosophy, and flourishing of literature. The country may experience a cultural renaissance as more people engage in intellectual and creative pursuits. Increased curiosity and open-mindedness will grow. A critical thinking population is more curious, open to new ideas, and willing to engage with different perspectives. This leads to a more dynamic and intellectually vibrant society. Enhanced quality of life, Uncle. How about the quality of life of a country that practices critical thinking amongst its societies? Better decision making will be something that will be a very successful thing. In everyday life, individuals will make more informed and rational decisions about health, finances, relationship, and personal well-being. This could lead to better outcomes for individuals and families. Improved public health will be a thing that will be successful. Critical thinking enables people to evaluate medical information, adopt healthier lifestyle, and demand better healthcare services, leading to improved public health outcomes. What about sustainable development and environmental stewardship? How do tackling environmental challenges get done here when the community is full of critical thinkers? A critical thinking populace will be more equipped to understand and address complex environmental issues like climate change, population, and sustainability. Citizens would push for policies and solutions that protect the environment for future generations. For future generations. Don't be thinking about now only. Think about the future generation. It requires critical thinkers to be able to think for future generation. Innovation in sustainability. Critical thinkers would innovate ways to use resources more efficiently, leading to sustainable agricultural practices, energy solution, and infrastructure development. Those three in place, a country will be unstoppable. So what about strong civil society and democracy? That would be doing so well. Empowered citizens are there. Critical thinking is essential for a healthy democracy. Citizens would be more active in civic life. They will be participating in public debates, demanding transparency, and holding leaders accountable. Resilient democratic institutions. Critical thinking can lead to the strengthening of democratic institutions, such as free press, independent courts, and accountable governance. This reduces the likelihood of authoritarianism and ensures personal freedom. Fostering debate and discourse. In a society where critical thinking is valued, open dialogue and debate becomes the norm. Different ideas and opinions are considered, leading to richer and more thoughtful public discourse. Better global standing is another advantage. There will be an influence on the global stage. A country that values critical thinking could become a leader in global problem solving, diplomacy, and innovation. It could influence international policies, trade, and development through thoughts from the leadership. Through thought leadership. There will be an attraction of talent and investment. When they see that a country knows what they're doing, everybody will want to go there. A country that fosters a culture of critical thinking may attract global talent, researchers, and entrepreneurs, as well as foreign investment, leading to more dynamic economic growth and development. Instead of that country going to other countries to look for help, other countries will be bringing their money willingly to come and profile business and help in there. Greater equity and justice is another advantage. Fairer legal system will be a thing. Critical thinkers demand justice, fairness, and equality. This could lead to reforms in the legal and judicial systems, ensuring the laws are applied fairly and that everyone, regardless of background, has access to justice. What about social mobility? With a stronger education system and more opportunities for innovation and critical engagement, social mobility could improve, and that will reduce inequality and creating a more inclusive society. In summary, my viewers, everywhere you are in the world, if the majority of a population begins to think critically, the country could experience significant improvements in governance, in economic growth, in education, in social harmony, and overall the quality of life. Critical thinking lays the foundation for a thriving, equitable, and sustainable society. So in your schools and everywhere, in your churches, in your community, encourage critical thinking. Don't shut it down. Now, let me tell you a story titled The Day Our Minds Breaks Free. I told you from the beginning that the main title is The Day Our Minds Broke Free. All right. I'm going to tell you this story as AJ, Here we go. Listen up. If you have been watching this video till this time, I want to say thank you to you. I value your time and I appreciate your effort. It means you are also grasping quality information from this video. So I thank you and I appreciate you for sticking around. But here's the last part of the video where I tell you a story titled The Day Our Mind Broke Free. There was a time when the land I am from was caught in a thick fog. No, not the kind you can see or touch, but the kind that blinds your mind and shackles your spirit. It was a fog of ignorance, where most of us didn't question what we were told. We didn't challenge the way things were done, and we didn't even see that we had the power to challenge anything. Life moved in circles, with the same mistakes being made over and over again, and the same voices manipulating our choices. The same voices manipulating our choices. Our leaders at the time, well, they were no different. They fed off of our complacency. They ruled without being questioned, and corruption spread like a wildfire. It's still there right now. We lived in a world where promises were broken and lies were accepted as truth. Many of us didn't even realize the chains we wore every day. Chains that weren't made of metal, but made of ideas, fears, and the acceptance of things as they were. It seemed hopeless. But there were whispers of something that could cut through the fog. They called it critical thinking. At first, it was just an idea, something for the intellectuals, the dreamers, and the few brave enough to ask, why? But little by little, that question becomes louder. It became louder. Why should we accept the lies? Why should we settle for a broken system? Why can't we change things? I'll never forget the day the tide began to turn. It was when the people, ordinary folks like me and you, started to listen. It wasn't overnight, no. At first, only a few dared to challenge the status quo. In schools, a handful of teachers started teaching kids not just what to think, but how to think. In small communities, elders encouraged debates, not to stir trouble, but to open their minds. And slowly the fog started to lift. As more people began to think critically, everything started to change. We began to question the decisions of those in power. We demanded evidence. We demanded transparency. We demanded the truth. The leaders who once thrived in the shadows couldn't hide anymore, because the light of inquiry was too bright. We held them accountable. Corruption, which had poisoned the roots of our society, began to wither as more of us refused to accept things blindly. The economy too began to grow. You see, when people start thinking critically, they innovate, they create, they solve problems that others think are impossible. Our industries, once stuck in outdated practices, started to evolve, and young entrepreneurs led the way with fresh ideas that pushed the country forward. Soon, we were no longer a nation caught in a cycle of stagnation. We became a land of inventors and dreamers, people willing to break the mold. But the most powerful change was in the hearts of the people. We no longer saw ourselves as victims of our circumstances. With every new idea and every challenge to the status quo, we realized we had power, not the kind that comes with titles or wealth, but the kind that comes from questioning, analyzing, and learning. Families learned to have open conversations, and communities united in purpose rather than fear or blind loyalty. In time, the fog lifted completely. Our country was no longer a place where decisions were made in the dark. We were a nation of thinkers, creators, and problem solvers. We held our leaders to the highest standards because we held ourselves to those standards. The culture shifted from one of accepting the way things were to one of constantly asking how we could make things better for everyone. I look back on those days sometimes, thinking about the chains we didn't know we wore and how we broke free. The key wasn't force or violence. It was a simple thing, really. It was the courage to think, to question, and to never stop seeking the truth. That's how we were freed. Not by some external force, but by the power of our own minds. I lean back, smile, crossing my face as I glanced at the young listeners gathered around. And that, I said, is how we became free. You all watching me right now can also become free. Thank you for watching this video. See you in another video. Bye for now.